I was a server at a really nice restaurant and ended up working a dinner in our private room for the president of a major movie production studio's birthday. One of the guests at the dinner was apparently a major producer and insanely rich. I heard them discussing how he had decided to collect every bottle of a very nice winemaker's specific vintage. To put into context, this bottle would probably go for about $2,000 per in a restaurant. Not sure what retail would be. He also had a full-time employee tracking down private collections and restaurant wine cellars that might have the bottles. At that point, he had over 4,000 bottles of the one wine, organized by serial number in a custom-made cellar. He told a story about how Martin Scorsese had bad-mouthed a franchise he funded, and when he later called looking for funding for The Irishman, he told him to go fuck himself. At one point in the dinner, his assistant, one of 3 assistants sitting at the end of the long dinner table, informed him that the first truffles of the season had been delivered to some chef in Tokyo. So producer guy goes, "Great. Anyone want to go to Tokyo this weekend for a truffle tasting?" A couple of people said yes, so he instructed the assistant to make sure one of the jets is available for the trip. They stayed 3 hours after we closed, bought every bottle of the same brand of wine, different vintage we had in our cellar, for the road. Let me taste a 1989 Chateau Haut-Briand, and tipped $3,600 for the lateness of their departure. I work for a company that provides a platform to host auctions, so I've been to a lot of these type of events here in the Northeast. I'll never forget what happened at this one event for a ritzy private school, during the live auction for a yacht trip around France, Paris. This one woman, who I guess helped secure the package or had friends who donated it, was not happy with the bid price that was going to win. Basically saw it as an insult. She got up on stage, bitched everyone out, then said, "Fine. If you all won't spend the right amount, I'll do it." Lady spent $60,000 on the trip out of spite, walked off stage, grabbed her purse, and just walked out. I once seen someone add guac to their Chipotle order. I would never financially recover from that. I went on a punk cruise earlier this year. It was a week long, and my cheap-ass room for 2 people cost about $3,800. I got into a conversation with a person who had a super expensive suite, and when they asked me about the accommodations I mentioned, I had an interior room, but it was all I could afford. They said $38,000 isn't that much. I corrected them and said $3,800. They said they didn't even know rooms were that cheap and asked if there were rats. Worked for a billionaire for a few months. They bought and rented out an entire village for their staff while their main home was built. They have multiple other properties but wanted their forever home built from the ground up. We had a horrendous storm. They decided they were going to board their jet and flew to America until it passed. They didn't want close neighbors, so they bought every house and patch of land within 5 miles. I ended up sleeping on and having free roam of a country house, approximately 5 bedrooms, and several acres of land. The security team alone was costing in excess of £80,000 a month. If events happened or family came to visit, it could potentially double. Client was very nice, complimented me and my dogs, but I was instructed by the rest of the security team to keep conversations with client to a minimum, so didn't really know what to do. Al just kind of mumbled, "Thank you," and went on with my patrol. Beautiful house. Until you've seen wealth like that, you don't believe it exists, and when you see it in person, it kind of stuns you. They had chairs worth more than my vehicle and everything in it. I was invited to a Sports Booster alumni fundraiser for a college. They get their friends to give $10,000 plus to the college football team in exchange for club seats and booze that acts as a bonus business tax expense write-off. That's the backstory. Here's the fucked up part. One of the night activities was a dinner and an entrepreneur brainstorming session for the club where they would take all of these rich assholes in one room, get them all drunk, and then see what business ideas they could come up with to make the club even more money. Over the course of an hour or so, these business owners came up with ideas for absolutely diabolical scams. One scheme included sending fake bills that the recipient would just pay because it would be too much work to question it. Went to a multi-million-dollar mansion in Texas to shoot video at a birthday party. They had an open bar, and so the many rich guests got very drunk. One guy so drunk was bragging in a booming voice about how much money he launders. He said something like, "Yeah, my boss launders so much money that he lets me take some off the top. I make some good money from how much my boss launders, let me tell you." He was so willing to go on and on bragging, and I was just shocked. This isn't anything wild, but I work at a dermatologist's office, and we have a patient who comes in about every 6 months and drops around $6,000 on filler. Last time she was in, we somehow got on the topic of holiday decorating, and she told me that for Christmas, she hires 10 to 15 people to help her decorate 27 live Christmas trees. I asked if that was all for her house, and she said yes. There's usually 1 or 2 trees in each room, and every tree is decorated to match the theme of that room. For example, in her home movie theater, she has a tree decorated with film reels, popcorn, and other movie-themed stuff. I already knew she had money, but hearing about her mansion and the fact that she buys and decorates 27 live trees every year with a team of people just blew my mind. Years and years ago, assisted a photographer at a fundraising event at the country club for a very, very, very private gated community in the North Carolina mountains. The turn into the entire community was all but disguised as a junky old mountain holler driveway. No signage, missed it the first 2 times. Absolutely grilled at the guardhouse before they let me through, and then about 30 years into driving up, holy shit, the Garden of Eden. It was wild how well hidden everything was. The event was at the country club, and there were some very famous names in attendance. It was my job to stand beside the photographer and write down the names of those in attendance as they lined up for their photo op with the famous names. During the dinner was upstairs inserting photos and polishing already immaculate solid sterling picture frames that had to have weighed a couple of pounds each, and then passing them off to a handful of staff with 1,000-yard stares to be arranged on tables by the doors upon exit after the event ended. Then standing downstairs beside that table, checking names off a list as the donors, attendees left and were supposed to pick up their parting gift. Except it never really got that far because the sheer volume of people who saw their photos in those frames just tried to fucking steal them. Never mind that they were clearly intended as a donor gift. That part didn't even matter. I was hired help. I had nothing to do with anything except the expectation that I'd hand them off and check a name off a list, assuming that the event organizers had shared that information with the attendees/donors. I guess they didn't? People were literally swiping them and shoving them into their jackets, pockets, down pants, and/or purses and hauling ass for the door while I stood there desperately trying to explain, "It's a gift. If you don't mind, what's your name so I may check it off that you received yours?" That went down like a lead balloon. Apparently, being told that something was intended as a gift after you already fucking stole it was considered rude. Maybe you should have asked before you tried to shove it down your pants? I've witnessed wealth. I don't possess it, but I've been in the company of more than plenty, and sometimes to the point of excess. But this was on a level of its own. These people collectively possessed more fuck you money than some small countries, but behaved no better than a flash mob on an Apple store in San Francisco. I've just never seen anything like it, before or since.